last time you were in a place where there was no toilet paper? Well, I'm here to tell you that that's quite something to work through. And I'll tell you what they give you in, you know, if you hear about places like India, of course, where there's poverty, and what you get is a little pink can, not a big pink, a little pink can, with water. And usually there's a rusted little handle, you know, wire that you carry, and you go out and you take care of your business, and you use your hand and water. Now that's something that, you know, you would have to go very far to experience, but believe me, people are doing this every day of the year. If they're not, you know, if you're worried about 5 people sharing, you know, the same bowl of rice, and families, by the way, in India are extended, and there's not a lot of, in 30 years ago, there wasn't a lot of money, but everybody had extended families, so they'd all be eating out of the same rice cauldron. They had food, but they certainly didn't have money for toilet paper. And that's one of the things you do find out when you travel. So, what can I say? That's reality. And that shows you how buffered we are from some aspects of reality on the planet happening as we speak. I mean, something to think about. Also, I wrote a book about working with Norman Mailer, and one of the things I mentioned in it was that when you are hiking in the mountains of the Himalayas up in you know, the Northwest, I'm not talking about going to Mount Everest. That didn't interest me to read, that kind of stuff. I just mean hiking in beautiful God's country mountains, little villages. There was no food around. And when you see how little food people had, they share the chapati with you, a tortilla. When I go to a restaurant, I've never forgotten that, and it's still hard for me to this day to see how much good food is thrown right out. People, you know, they take a couple of bites and into the trash. It still hurts. I still experience some kind of pang. Not that I have any answer, but that's something to think about. That hunger is a reality out there, and at least we can be aware of that. So, okay. I mentioned Outrageous Fortune, right? Yes. That's that book by Tom Lennon, Head of New Dramatists. Now, by the way, if the head of New Dramatists is saying that the institutional theaters of the nonprofit arena have become bureaucratized to the degree that it's not that they're taking money per se, but they're no longer doing very exciting, that they're all protecting jobs. And bureaucrats are making nice with other bureaucrats, and it's all very comfy, and that's great. And there's all these people who are sort of artsy, and they're in these companies, and they have staffs, and they're all on salaries. It turns out that you get more money from grants if you have more people on salary. What's that got to do with getting a good production? Okay, just thought I'd mention that. Now, by the way, libraries are a very important resource, and ones that we should really protect. And they're being threatened now, and I don't believe in particularly in budget deficits. But libraries were formed by Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie said, "Look, I'm going to give you the money to build the 42nd Street Library. You staff it, but you make sure it stays open after 5 p.m. and Saturdays so that working people can use the library." Now, we take it for granted. Libraries were not taken for granted, and they were given as a gift from Andrew Carnegie. In 1905, they built that huge library on 42nd Street. An extraordinary gift. Not that I'm in favor of benevolent capital dictatorships, but that's one guy who came here with 2 nickels to rub together and made this vast fortune, and he did do that. And his bargain was, I'll give you the library, you staff it, but you make sure it's open for working people on weekends and on Saturdays. And we may be losing that very, very soon. So, especially for people in theater, there's much to be gained from reading. Last time I listed some authors. That was a very incomplete list. All I'm suggesting is that reading is critical to do informed art. You have to know what's been done before, whether you like who wrote it or not. and we need to read. They say the internet is a mile wide and an inch deep. That's very frightening, because then it's true. You look up Wikipedia, next, forget it, there's nothing. You know? I mean, I'm kind of exaggerating, but the fact is, when you have a whole book on something, it's a vastly different experience of trying to find different things on the internet. And so we're giving away our freedom of choice and of deep knowledge by giving up books. I don't want to sound like a Luddite, I'm not against the Kindle, but the fact is, in my local library out in Clifton, New Jersey, where I'm living right now, I don't see young kids going to the stacks. They go right to the computers. That's what libraries become. Receptacles for people who can't afford to have a computer at home, access to the internet, which is fine, but you got to read. That's the bottom line. And whoever you read, I don't think it matters. It makes the mind function. Personally, when I read, I've always said this from years when I was a teenager. I was reading Norman Mailer's book, Armies of the Night. Fire on the Moon, of a Fire on the Moon. All right, before that, I was slightly, let's say I was socialistically inclined. I didn't think we should be spending money on moon voyages when there was lack of educational funds and hunger and blah, blah, blah. And then I read that book and it changed my mind entirely about wanting to go to the moon. You know, so that changed my life. And I think the way he broke ideas down, and I mean, I know he's not so popular these days, but the fact is he would have an analysis of an issue, and the way he broke it down was extremely, I felt like I was learning and I was being taught how to think. That's saying a lot. And recently I read a column in the Times by this guy who's a professor and taught grammar. And he said what I said about Mailer's writing, he said about teaching grammar was that it's not so much that you get subject and object and verb right, it teaches you how to think, that it had an inherent value on its own, in and of itself. I thought that was really, really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But that's what I thought about Mailer's writing, so that's why I embraced his work. I didn't ask anybody, who keeps a journal? Mucho importante. Just, I don't mean he did this to me, I did that, blah, blah, blah. I mean a journal about ideas you have, about ideas that are sparked by something. Something very interesting has happened. In the old days, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, everyone had people who kept journals had a little notebook. But these days, it falls somewhere in between looking like a dinosaur to have something actually writing on, because everyone has a laptop, or a pad, electronic, that it's peculiar, because the thing about a journal that you carry with you is that it's small enough to be portable. You know, they used to have these little books, like about that big, that you could take little notes in as you were traveling, or as you were looking out the train window, or the bus window, or whatever it was. I would take the Greyhound from LA to Telluride in Colorado, at this Telluride Film Festival, and I would just love looking out the window and trying to kind of either ideas that came to me, notions that I, it was just like rambling around in my brain as we rode for 23 hours. I don't see that anymore. I think especially as an artist, keeping a journal is like almost like one of your basic tools. So I thought I'd mention that again because I didn't get a chance to mention it last time. Museums. And God knows, New York has some of the most fantastic museums in the world. Now, somewhere along the line, again, there's a lot of growing bureaucracies. Now, museums have these enormous staffs. The publicity director at the Metropolitan Museum of Art gets something like $750,000 a year salary. That's a lot of money. And it's $20 to get in to the Museum of Modern Art, except on Friday. It's free after 4. Now, my notion is that museums were art for the people, and they're all charging admission now. When I went to Stuyvesant High School down there when I was on 15th Street, I would get depressed after school. I would go to the Frick and hang out in the atrium